Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders with Marketing Huddle, and today we're privileged to have with us Brian Smith, who is the founder of UGG Boots. Brian, welcome to the program.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me.
So here's something that I read on your website in your bio. It said, he soon noticed that there were no sheepskin boots in California. And the first thought that came to me when I read that line is, so what? Why was that something to notice? Why was at that moment in time, why did you notice there were no sheepskin boots in California? Why was that a thing?
Well, I had spent 10 years trying to be an accountant, and it took 10 years to graduate, and I quit the day I graduated because I hated it so much. And I came to America looking for a business that I could bring back to Australia because all the trends were coming out of California, like Levi jeans and waterbeds and all these great products that were going through Australia. So I came here looking for the next big thing to take back to Australia, and it was 2 or 3 months. I still didn't find it. And one day, I'd been doing a lot of surfing up at Malibu, and I made a ton of friends up there. And I was reading through a surfer magazine one day, and there was an ad for this, pair of sheepskin boots. And I went, oh my God, there's none here. And the reason that was relevant is that 1 in 2 Australians had some sort of sheepskin footwear, whether it was boots or slippers or whatever. And that's when, the light went on, and I went, oh, my God, this is such a huge opportunity. It's sort of like Christopher Columbus bringing tobacco back from the,
Yep.
the Orient, It's something that's in everywhere in one area, and it doesn't exist in another. That's how it worked. It wasn't rocket science.
Yeah, except it did take you noticing something. You could have been flipping through that publication and seen an ad and just kept right on going, right?
Yeah.
So doesn't it kind of go to like a business or even a life principle of like awareness and just kind of being aware of what's going on around us to even be aware for the purpose of capitalizing on an opportunity, a relationship, or something like that?
Yeah, there's this great quote. It's like ancient. It's hundreds, thousands of years old. Once you start out on a path, the universe will conspire to work with you.
Yeah.
And this is one of those instances. Because I was aware and looking, and I saw that photo, I registered. Whereas if somebody wasn't looking and didn't give a damn, it would have gone right by them. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And
what year was that?
That was 1979.
Okay. So at that point, do you think? So I'm gonna preface the question with an observation from education in Asian countries like China. They really, really value any kind of Western education. So they want to come to the United States to get educated. And my dad is an international consultant and goes to China. And any time that he can go over there, they're just like a sponge wanting to learn from Western. So the point is, sometimes that culture that's opposite of where you are, it could be the same thing. Education is in China, education is in America, but because it came from. So with that thought in mind, did you feel like, you could have had some kind of product like the sheepskin boots, and the fact that it came from Australia kind of brought that brand story with it and kind of made it a little bit more attractive than just, hey, I'm selling some boots?
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that was around about the Crocodile Dundee time, and the America's Cup time, So Australia was sort of featuring back in the late 70s, early 80s. So that was a big benefit. But there are a lot of people that tried to bring meat pies into America, and it failed miserably, which is another Australian icon. So it really had to be a product that was going to make it anyway for it to work. You can't just assume that because it's new and different, it's going to happen,
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure that you set up a order form, because that was way back in '79 when you couldn't just pop on and create a website with 2 or 3 mouse clicks like you can today. But I'm sure you put an ad out or started a campaign, and you were just flooded with business, and it was roses, and everything went perfully from day one, right?
Let me tell you how the roses work. The first, I bought some samples over, and I had a buddy, and he went out to all of the shoe stores in Southern Cal and came back with 150 business cards of every shoe retailer and not a single order. And they're all saying, going, you're crazy trying to sell sheepskin in California. And intellectually it was right, but I knew that they were wrong, because Australia's climate's identical to the California. And so it struck me that, being a good entrepreneur, you have to know when to pivot. And I thought, okay, well, how come all my buddies up at Malibu think this is such a hot idea? And I went, oh my God, they all surf. And so many surfers who from California had been down to Australia on their little pilgrimage and brought a bunch of boots back for their buddies. So within the surf community, it was really well known. So we started, going out to surf shops, and our first runs were, just with the samples, hey, we're thinking of importing these, and all the surf shops are going, oh, fantastic, man, you're going to make a fortune, So we got this from everywhere we went. So we raised like 20 grand and bought 500 pairs. We sent 15 grand down to Australia and bought 500 pairs in. And after they arrived, Doug took the San Fernando Valley, and I took all the beach routes, and went to the same retailers who told us we were going to make a fortune, and said, okay, how many boots do you want? Now we got the order pad and the product, And they go, oh, man, well, congratulations, but we couldn't sell them out of our store. We just sell surfboards and trunks and sandals, and they're way too expensive for us. You should go to the shoe stores, And so we went to probably hundreds of surf shops that we'd previously got told were fantastic. And our first season sales was 28 pairs.
Wow.
And it's a $1.5 billion now, and our first thing was 28 pairs. And the lesson from that, because, I've started a lot of businesses since, and I've noticed this pattern, and I ended up writing a book called The Birth of a Brand. And the theme of it is that you can't give birth to adults. Every product, every service, every sitcom on TV, every new religion starts with someone conceiving it and then giving birth, taking the first action. Like the birth of UGG was me buying 6 pairs of samples. And then every business goes into this infancy where it just lies there, and it lies there, and every now and again it'll giggle, but you just got to keep changing diapers and feeding it. And it seems like it's never going to move. And that's when most entrepreneurs give up, because they think that there's no traction for their idea and that nobody likes it. But eventually it'll start toddling, and that's cool, because, the first customers are buying it, and the newspapers and magazines are writing articles about it, and that's when it starts to get a bit of life and it's fun. But that'll go really quickly into the youth, where you've got consistent orders coming in and production's great, the shipping and accounting is great, and that's a really good phase of business. And you can run a business up to $20 million on that youth phase. But if it's a really, really killer product or service like UGG was, it'll hit the teenage years, and it's like when all the bets are off. You want to be at every party in town. And for UGG, we were getting dragged out all across the nation way, way too fast. And I nearly lost control of it several times in the teenage phase. But eventually, the administrators come and put all the controls in, and it becomes a mature business. So every business goes through that cycle.
Yeah, I was thinking of a question all the way back to when you started taking them out to the people that expressed interest, and then they were like, oh, well, you need to go to another place, because I think that's a really critical piece of launching an idea or a brand or a business, which is, if until people whip out the money or the credit card or the PO or something, don't take their word for it, because you had a lot of attaboys and pats on the back and this is going to rock, and then you have to listen to that, but you can't take it in and be so myopic that that's the only thing you hear, because you have to test the market and test other people, because like you just described, even back then, human nature was, yeah, that's awesome when you're not asking me to pay for it, but when you come back with an order pad, it's like, oh, well, yeah, not so much.
Exactly. And it leads to another theme in my book, which is that every entrepreneur must have some level of ignorance to be successful. Otherwise, you'd never start. So I was ignorant that they weren't going to buy them, but I went ahead anyway. And what happened is I got left with this huge problem. I got 480 pairs left in my third bedroom. What the hell am I going to do? And it was my investors' money, so it forced me to carry on. And that was because of the ignorance of me, not knowing the resistance I was going to have, it caused me to pivot and figure out how to get around that. Because, the next couple of years, the sales were 5,000 because I was doing swap meets, and I had a full inventory in my van when I was surfing up at Malibu, and I would open up the back of the van, and I had a huge business going up at Malibu, but it was, 10,000. And the next year I advertised in, the magazines, got these models and posed them on the beach at Wind and Sea down in La Jolla, and the sales went to 15,000, and so the next year I got better looking models and posed them on the beach at Wind and Sea, and sales went to 20,000, but it should have been way bigger, And I was having a beer with one of my buddies who owned a surf shop, and he just says, "Oh, shut up, Brian," and he calls out to these little grommets in the back room, "Hey, you guys, come out here. What do you guys think of Uggs?" And they all came out and went, "Oh, those Uggs, man, they're so fake. Have you seen those ads? Those models, they can't surf." And instantly I knew for 3 years I'd been sending the wrong image to my target market. And really quickly I pivoted again, and I called up a buddy who was running a Scholastic Surf Association. I said, "Hey, Pete, you got any young kids who are going to turn pro? Because I got no money, but I can pay them in boots." And he gave me Mike Parsons and Ted Robinson. So instead of the expensive photographers, I just went surfing with these guys with my own camera and just did a bunch of shots, on the way to Black's Beach down in La Jolla and Trestles up in San Onofre. And these are classic walks. Every kid who would surf would die to be walking along the path with Mike Parsons, And so I ran these ads, and the sales went to 220,000 in the next season. The reason why? I connected the right image with my target market. The product was identical. In fact, the product in the ads that worked was so small you couldn't even hardly see the feet. It was all about these kids reading it, wanting to go, "Oh my God, I'd love to be in that image," And there's the big UGG logo. I better buy some UGG boots. And that's what.
So that was like early influencer marketing.
It was my first understanding of marketing and sales, and I ended up becoming passionate about that. That became the skill that took the company up into the millions.
So what would you say once you had that realization, how deep did you drill down into that specific demographic before you started then doing kind of like some brand extensions? Because obviously now the brand doesn't have only boots. There's the shoes and everything else, and men's and women's and kids and all that. But how long did you hang on to that demographic before you started going, okay, now let me layer in?
I never lost it, but I added to it. Right?
Yeah.
Because the roots of the company is still back on the beaches of California.
Mm-hmm.
But then it was like, okay, I need to get into the snow market. Okay, well, snowboarding was just starting. So I used the same formula. I hired a couple of young snowboarders and piggybacked on the success from the pro surfers. Then it was there. And then I was, trying to sell in Minneapolis, and they're going, "Well, nobody reads Surfer Magazine or Snowboard here." And I realized, this is, again, pivoting, which is, I always come back to entrepreneurs have to pivot when they hit a wall, And I thought, okay, well, what do the kids do here in the winter? And it was, well, they play hockey. And I went, oh, my God, it's perfect. Freezing cold rinks. They've got to change their shoes. And the moms who come and sit and watch are in these 40-degree rinks freezing. And it turned out to be a perfect market. So I got some young kids and some pros in the hockey industry, and that was great. But the really big change came when we were in all these niches all across the country, but I wanted a really cohesive, image. So I settled on casual comfort and did a huge PR campaign that was picked up by USA Today on the front page of the lifestyle section, and that eventually led to a fluke meeting with getting boots to Oprah, and that was really when the whole thing went international. I built it up, on a national basis, but then it got so big I sold the company because it needed so much bigger financing when the world market took off. And then the new company, Deckers, had a girl out of New York who took on the branding after that, and she's the one that really took it into the billions, over in the international market. So
Which at that point there was some good momentum behind it. You did the heavy lifting and got the train, out of the station and down the tracks, and then when you throw some coal on the fires and throw in the turbo boosters.
That's the interesting thing, because if I had $10 million when I first started, I would have blown it on all these wrong images in the ads. I would have wasted it, because I hadn't put the roots down and figured out what makes this thing survive. What's the intrinsic message here? I would have wasted. And Deckers, who bought the company, they could never have started UGG with all of their money, because it takes that 10 to 15 years of roots to get down before a company can come international.
So you talked about matching, having the message to market match with your demographics and images and influencer marketing, things like that. Yeah. So huge lessons learned there, which we could probably spend, 4.5 weeks on just that one topic.
You can make a whole business course on
Yep,
that.
exactly. Yeah. Well, can you think of another, lesson learned from a failure that you noticed? Because, let's even pause for a second, even right there. You could have, back in those early days, thought, well, this is as good as it gets, and I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm doing my ads, I'm running this, and here's my sales. I guess this was just a good side business. But you had to notice some things about it and tweak and improve to then, really make that realization.
Yeah. There were a lot of times where I went close to losing the business or giving up. In fact, there was one period where, my partner at the time, who was, that first 20,000, I thought I'd never need any more money. Well, we had to buy that investor out and get a bigger one. Then we had to buy them out and get a bigger one. And then I had these guys, from Anaheim that took it on, and they were financing the production out of Australia. I had one factory there, and the main partner died, and the manufacturer didn't think I was going to be able to hold it all together. And even though I'd started with him 8, 9, 10 years previously, and in the marketplace, the sales were going fantastic, but he didn't think I was going to be able to pay him because, my track record when I owned the company wasn't that great with him. I always paid him 100%, but it was always late, And so, unbeknownst to me, he was looking for other distributors, and I ended up going to this trade show, and having tried like crazy to get, I realized he wasn't going to come through for me, right at the end, when it was close to shipping time, and I'd been down to Australia looking for other manufacturers, and hadn't really had much success, although there was one huge tannery who wanted to get involved with me. But they just wouldn't pull the trigger, So I went to this trade show, and I realized that my manufacturer had shipped all of my samples and boot product to a different distributor, and they called the brand Thugs, because the company was Thunderwear in the windsurfing industry, and they were calling them Thugs. And when I was at the trade show and I saw all my product with Thugs labels, I realized, oh shit, I'm not going to get any product. And I literally, told my wife, we're going to have to shut down. We're going to have to call all of our customers and tell them we can't deliver. And the last call I made was to that tannery in Australia, and he was so PO'd that my manufacturer did an end run. He just said, screw that guy, man. I'll get you all the boots you need. And so he cranked up his tannery and started sending skins to 4 or 5 different manufacturers that in a rush, in September, bringing product in. And I was able to survive, but I literally had planned to give up. So there's all of these, the universe really works in funny ways. If you're passionate about keeping it together.
Yeah, and I think that we can pick on a lot of cliche phrases that would apply there, like, persistence, and you never gave up, and you tapped into your resources around you, and all of those things. But in reality, you had that kind of like Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich, that burning desire.
Exactly
you never let it go out.
Yeah, and I tell you, that is my Bible, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. And one of the statements I have in my book is, nearly always your most disappointing disappointments will become your greatest blessings. And from that, the guy doing an end run on me meant I got a whole slew of new manufacturers, and I wasn't beholden to one anymore. And a year later, I survived, and now the sales were double again. We're doing 8 to 10 million, and that supplier missed out on the big hit.
Yeah. And he tried to do an end run, and he looked at the short game, not the long game, and
that's right. That's funny. So, looking back, it was my greatest blessing that he did that.
So, last question, which is just help us to know where we can get your book, because the birth of a brand, I love alliteration, so B and B, birth and a brand, and then just the concept behind it, which is you don't give birth to adults because, it's a baby brand, and you got to, stick with it and care for it and watch the changes and stages. So what is the best place that we can go and learn more about your book?
Well, Amazon for sure, which is like the automatic answer. Or it's also available from my website, which is Brian Smith Speaker, BRIAN, smithspeaker.com. And, I do a ton of speaking now. In fact, that's what I love, because I go to these entrepreneurial venues, and I love talking to entrepreneurs. And, I got a speaking page there you can look at if anyone's interested in bringing me into their organization. It's my passion to help new entrepreneurs.
Well, Brian, it was just such a pleasure to meet you, to speak with you, learn some of these lessons from a unique perspective, because I think that some of these lessons are age-old. None of them are revolutionary, because, you need to have a good message to market match. But then when we can see that framed in this story of what you experienced, it really brings it home. So thank you so much for your time. It was wonderful getting to know you.
Hey, my pleasure, buddy. Thanks a lot, Mike.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.